there's these fires in Australia, like brush fires, where it got really dry, and it was crazy. It was everywhere, and there was this narrative even on TikTok, and this is like early 2020 or late 2019, that no one was covering this. People were tagging the Washington Post, and I was like, it's literally in the paper, like it's in our physical paper, it's online. And I did a video that was like a little tongue in cheek of like holding the paper up, and that was kind of the start of me going, I think media literacy is going to be even more important as we go on. And also I learned my lesson from there of like, okay, but don't be too much of a dick about it.
This is Rough Cut, your community-driven podcast on navigating the art and practice of nonfiction video storytelling from all of your friends at the Vecchio Consortium.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be joined today in great conversation by Dave Jorgenson, the host and co-founder of Local News International. I'm Ryan Kellett, and I most recently have been at Harvard doing a Nieman Berkman Klein Fellowship. And I'm so excited to talk with Dave today because Dave's been really busy. Dave's been making a few moves, making a few media moves, and that's not really the point of the conversation today. But it is an important piece of what you've been working on. And so, first of all, welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm into week 6 or so of being very busy.
Hey, at least you're counting by weeks now. When I check in with you by emails, you were counting by days last time I talked.
Wow, that's wild. I don't remember that. That's the other thing, is I feel like I'm in almost a when we did the quarantine TikToks during the pandemic, I'm in kind of that phase. I'm just like, I don't know where. I just know that I'm making 5 videos a week, and that's what I'm sticking to.
Well, we'll get to that. 5 videos a week, that's a lot. And the reason I wanted to make sure that you are counted both as a host and as a co-founder is because when I've been teaching content creation in my Harvard class, we talk about the founder's mindset and it being a really different kind of thing than just going in and sort of be representing an organization or representing yourself at an organization, and why that changes you. So maybe that's the place to start. What is it like being a co-founder, and what's that process been so far?
Well, I'm sure every co-founder has a unique situation, but I think mine is especially unique. I'm extra special, Ryan. But partially because the people I've co-founded with are, essentially my former bosses. And I mean that in the best way. I'm really glad they came along with me. So it's Lauren Sachs, who was my editor and deputy director of video post for many years. So she's seen, up to 4,000 TikToks that she's had to approve. And what was nice is from last day at the Post to day 1 of L&I, which were literally from a Tuesday to Wednesday, I was still just messaging her, hey, here's the one today. Can you look at it? And then the other person, Micah Gelman, who's the director of Video Post and now is another co-founder at L&I. So the dynamic is funny because we still have we've had a good working relationship and continue to, but it's on equal level. So that's a whole other thing I'm just like grappling with on a day-to-day basis, is that like Micah and I can both have he was never trying to tell me what to do, but now it's like, oh, we're having a conversation as equals, if that makes sense. And so already that's a funny thing. And yeah, as far as just co-found, the way I've been describing it is that we took some of the best parts of the Post, and there are many good parts of the Washington Post, but our part that we were kind of working on, which was the Washington Post universe, and we lifted out my section of it and are doing it elsewhere and trying to plant it, to make a George Feeney from Boy Meets World metaphor, which I do often. It's like when he tells, this is probably for like 5 listeners, but he's saying, he's talking about how like Topanga has been in this pot for a long time, and if you leave her there, she may not grow, but we have to put her into the garden. Okay, so we're putting this section into the garden so it can grow to be even bigger.
I love that, and I did not anticipate our first 4 minutes of conversation being dropping a Boy Meets World reference. Shout out to all the millennials out there who are just getting a nostalgia bomb right about
and
now.
Gen Z with Girl Meets World. There's an interesting like subsection there.
Yeah, I watched an episode of that. I don't know, not good. Yeah, I'm not totally sure it's quite there. So you talked about your former bosses, now co-founders. Like one of the things I'm really interested in is is really thinking about like what does it mean to do this work alone versus do this work with other people. And you have always had a specific dynamic. You started to describe it a little bit. But one of the things that I sort of teach on, in a variety of different things, is like you're kind of like a solopreneur, but you're not quite that, right? You're doing this with a group of people in a community of people. Tell me, like, what is the value of that, and the different roles of that? So you talked a little bit about Lauren
Yeah.
specifically, and you talked about Micah, but like, is it just about having an editor? Is it about having someone who's working on the business? What gives you the space to do
Yeah.
what you do?
So there's two pieces of this. One is the more like perhaps like I don't know. There's a part of this that's like, oh, it makes sense as soon as I tell you, and I think it's a logical thing for anyone thinking about independent journalism, if that's what you want to call it. Which I think it's weird because we're three of us. So are we independent? If it's more than one person, I don't know. But
Yes.
okay, good. So Lauren, of course, it's like it's not just like, oh, she's looked at, like, she knows my voice, she knows all these things, like she knows exactly what works and what doesn't work. She also knows solutions. So if I'm working on something like, oh, this isn't quite working, or oh, I didn't quite word that the right way, she's like, well, why don't you do it like that one time from like 2022, whatever. Like there's a history there and a sense of like what works and what doesn't work, and that is something that's like that you, I mean, you truly can't put a price on it. So that's really big. And Lauren's obviously doing other things where we have sort of a section of our company that's also going to be kind of consulting for other media organizations. And that's where she'll be working on that, as well as Micah. And Micah's very much in the business corner as well. So Micah's handling everything, including like setting up our bank account, which was a really funny Zoom call we had with the bankers where they asked the name of our company, and the parent company is actually Family Loser LLC. That's an LLC I made a few years ago. And they were like, man, they were very straight faced until we said that. And then they finally broke and started laughing, like, what? And then they're like, well, it's Local News International. And they're like, wait, what's that? I'm like, don't worry about it. Just Family Loser LLC. Please give us a bank account. And so anyway, we have that. That's really important to have, because I think most people going independent are just going by themselves. And it's kind of like, oh, I made this and I'm just going to put it out there, and hopefully it's fact checked well enough, and that I'm, there's no extra sort of layer of editorial anything overview. So that's invaluable, and I'm really glad I have that. On the other side of things, that's I think more specific to me and Elle and I. So much of our stuff is very, comedy based. It's, the humor is injected into most videos, and I do think there's like that sort of collaborative, almost sketch show part of it as well that I've always really liked. That was very true at the Post, especially early on when we started the TikTok account. That was, sort of pre-pandemic, where I was trying to get as many people as possible on the account. That was very much by design for a lot of reasons, but one of them is just the collaborative sense of like, oh, everyone's kind of enjoying this and has a piece of it, and we're all kind of making it funnier together. So having that, as opposed to just kind of being off on your own trying to make a funny video, is it's enormous. It's really great.
Yeah, we're gonna get to some times at the Post early on, because we were both there in
Yes.
very different roles, doing very different things, which we've never really talked about, like
No,
in
I'm
a
excited.
deep way. But
Yeah.
first, I do want to get in just a really quick sort of question around naming. Right, you named this Local News International.
Yeah.
Uh, what's behind that, right? Like, I think you have like a launch video with the Jeff Bezos with leaving, but Local News International existed before that.
Yes. So I, late last year was like, I really, I didn't give the Boy Meets World metaphor to Micah, but I did say like, hey, I feel like I'm kind of just hitting my ceiling here. And I said that to Lauren for a while. And, I was kind of going, I was kind of really strongly considering going independent already at that point. And they said, well, what if you launched your own YouTube channel? Which is what the main thing I wanted to do was, go, hey, like, I'm really glad that I've made this thing, and that we all, like, Carmela and Joey are part. I was really proud of what we had done, but, you know, long term, am I making something for me that, I have the IP, for instance, and things like that. Um, and so they said, you can start launch your own channel. That's fine, simultaneously at the Post. So I did that. It was my already existing YouTube channel that I've had since 2012, that still had some old like sketch show things from college on them, which I've since privated, though I think they're funny. And I changed the name of it to Local News International. And so I did 6 long form videos in the first few months of this year while working at the Post, and that was using post reporting mostly, and I'm really proud of that. And so that was just a nice, the idea, and I did so in earnest, was I was going to do this simultaneously at the Post. And then a number of things happened, some that are, maybe obvious to listeners, some maybe not. And I was just like, I think I'm just ready to go and do this on my own. I think I've basically have put my toe in the water and realized, oh, this is something that I really love. And I just want to go for it and take that risk. But yeah, Local News International started basically in January of this year. And the title is a little bit tongue in cheek. Part of it is kind of poking fun at the Post, never really knowing if it's a local or a national paper or international paper. So like, why don't we just say all of them? I also am a fan of kind of overly long titles. I just mentioned that sketch show that had, so that my YouTube channel had all this old stuff on it. It was this thing I did in college called the Pre-Recorded Late Night Show. And that was like intentionally kind of a mouthful. And I just really like sort of mouthfuls and making other people say the title. I just think it's really funny to go, I love Local News International. Like, that's a really funny sentence to make someone say. And you have to earn it. But so that's where that title comes from. But that's a little bit of the history of that channel.
Yeah. Well, it is a slight mouthful, but LNI works pretty well.
Yes,
It's a
it
great
does.
acronym.
Yes.
And I think that makes a ton of sense. This is not the first naming encounter we've had. So this is the opportunity, maybe take our listeners back and talk a little bit about those early days at the Post. A memo came across my desk, as as it does when you work at the Post, and I was running our sort of audience and growth initiatives there, and you had been someone I'd met, but I had not really interacted with a ton. And it was this Micah had brought your memo into me and said, "Hey, look, this is something that we want to do." And he was a kind of getting some early feedback, might be a generous way to put it. Basically saying, "Will you allow me to do this?" And I was very supportive. But one of the naming piece of this was, of course, that you all wanted to name it what, Dave?
Squashington Post. I was quite passionate about this, and I've learned that you've squashed that, and I am years later thankful, but the time devastated.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So I was the random executive that said absolutely yes to everything except one thing.
Which was like the first page of the packet.
So I feel a little bad, but I also feel really good.
Yeah.
In that it sort of, launched this whole thing. And so just like take us back to that, because I remember some of those early TikToks really taking not even the world by storm, but just like our newsroom, this like micro community. And so, like, what was that like for you? What was happening? What interactions were you having in the newsroom? You were talking to my team, and you were talking to others, and like big name reporters, but also like Marty Barron. It was like a weird time.
Well, first of all, belated thank you, because I put this packet in front of a bunch of people and said, "Okay, can we do this?" And then it wasn't until 2 or 3 months later that Micah said, "Okay, do it, but keep it under the radar." So you have recently filled in this gap for me. Like, oh, that's what was happening in that time. But importantly, which you've also like established, is that I was already at the Post. So I'd already been there for a couple of years, almost a couple of years at that point, starting in 2017. And I think that's really important to the early TikTok days. Like, that might be the most important part, is because I'd already established a lot of relationships across the newsroom, or at least enough to kind of get my foot in the door in certain places and in certain sections of the paper to ask someone, "Hey, do you want to be in a TikTok?" And then the follow-up question, this is what TikTok is, because no one knew what it was. So including Marty Barron, and that was very much by design, where I was like, early on, I felt very strongly, and luckily Michelle Giacone, who was my direct boss then, agreed that Marty Barron should, be in a TikTok. And it's really funny because you talk about the sort of how it was the small thing in our newsroom. I think that's exactly right. And also DC, which is a high school.
Yes.
Because these videos were doing really well on TikTok. They're, anywhere from like 10 to 20 seconds. They weren't long. That's when TikToks were really generally all very short. And, but what people knew, like the reason people in DC knew about them was because I was posting them to Twitter. And it was like in this sort of Twitter sphere of like, what is the Washington Post doing over there? Which is why, again, I thank you for making it Washington Post. My thing with Washington Post, and the reason I was in the packet really, truly, was because I thought they wouldn't approve it if it was called @Washington Post. I thought if I take a step away from that, they're more likely to let me like try weird things. But luckily, That didn't happen. So all this crazy stuff I was doing was directly associated with the Washington Post. But bringing it back to the Marty thing, that was really important early on because he was game, and he did this video where I mistook him along with Hannah Jewell for Liev Schreiber. And that was really funny because everyone on Twitter got the joke, but no one on TikTok understood. They're like, why is what? They hadn't seen Spotlight. They didn't know what was going on, that he had played Marty Baron. So that was really important because as soon as I did that, I could point to other people and be like, yeah, David Farenthold, you should do this because Marty did one last week, or, Josh Dossie or Ashley Parker. By showing that the person up top had done it, it made it really easy to convince them to agree to be in a video. And it was even easier when those videos would go viral because then, people were like, oh, they either they wanted a piece of it for themselves, or honestly, more often and more earnestly, a lot of reporters wanted to impress like their kids or nieces or nephews. And so that was a big part of the early strategy.
Take the win. I love that.
Yeah.
And you're so right. Like it did feel like you kind of joined the club. Like when you got your like Dave video, right? Like kind of posted, and you were sort of working with a variety of people, and that sort of momentum, I think, really was really cool to see in a newsroom, and to sort of build a culture of sort of saying that.
Yeah.
But I do want to just briefly also talk about some of the YouTube work you were doing beforehand, right? Like again, this might be the only podcast where you're going to get like the full unedited like thing, because like we were and so the way that I was interacting is I worked a lot with Michelle Giacone, and so Michelle, being your editor, producer, or something,
she was the head of, at the time it was called Creative Video, and she was the head or director or whatever, and I was one of the people in Creative Video, and then it became a little more structured later on in Splinter.
Yeah, so Michelle, right, was really thinking about this in a show format, right, which is sort of YouTube centric in that way. And so can you help us like understand what was being created then? What's the difference, right, between working on a YouTube show for the Washington Post and launching a TikTok account? Like what is that jump like, and why does the platform matter? Why does the format matter? And what was the big difference?
Well, the one similarity to start off with, and truly there's not a lot, but was that we were trying to reach a younger audience. So it was very much like we're off platform trying to find this younger audience. And that's really where it stops. And that's where I said, okay, well, I'll try to make these videos. And first of all, they were longer. They're still, I the longest TikTok I've made, I think, was a little over 2 minutes. And that was like pretty much a one-off. These videos were, generally speaking, anywhere from like at the minimum 2 minutes to about 8 minutes. And it was under this channel called the Department of Satire. The Washington Post Department of Satire. I wanted to call it Washington Post Comics, but there was a thought that it was too confusing, that we actually have a comic section and there'd be a video comics. My argument was that, well, like these are basically the modern version of comics. But I understand why we got there. So we compromised where like the intro or the banner on the YouTube was comic strips. Anyway, so it was Department of Satire, and it was these long form video. And like the first one we did that I remember, and we did a lot, was Scaramucci had just been at the White House for 11 days. And there was this transcript that had been leaked in the New Yorker about when he had called the reporter there. What's his name? Ryan
Lizza.
Yes. And I believe it was Ryan Lizza, if I'm remembering correctly. So we did a reenactment of it, and we actually got this great actor whose name I'm also blanking on. He was in Veep, all kinds of things, to be the voice of the Mooch, and I would play the reporter listening back to him. Probably still our most successful Department of Satire video. Really funny, still holds up, but it was like very high production. And it took a while to do. I mean, not like a long time, but longer than a TikTok. And a lot of this stuff would take up to 2 weeks to do. And then you would post it and it would get like 300 views. So already it's kind of like, okay, we're trying and we're doing our best, but it's not getting, the numbers that we want. Luckily, the Post was really good about giving me a lot of time to play in the sandbox here. And I think the reason that's so important going into TikTok, and I'll explain even more differences in a second, but the reason that was really important was because it kind of helped me figure out what's the line, like how far can I go with these videos and within the Post style guide and standards. And so that was really helpful going into TikTok. So I'd already kind of had a lot of the conversations about, no, you can't make that joke. No, yeah, you can, whatever. So that felt good that I'd spent 2 years basically kind of like pushing up against the line to see what was possible. With TikTok, it was, yeah, you would make a video. I would come up with the idea. I'd walk into work that morning with an idea, shoot it, and sometimes it'd be up by 11 a.m. Eastern time because it was just that easy, and a lot of them were just based off of trends. So I would be like, here's this trend. This trend has been going off for about 19 hours, sometimes 10 hours. I would really try to jump on them as soon as possible. And I'd be like, let's try to make it as Washington Post as possible, use a reporter, whoever, to be in the trend and post it. And it would just, take off. And then even the stuff that was more like, intentional commentary or satire was still stuff that I'm just shooting on my phone. And because I have a history in video editing, I can edit it very quickly on my computer versus what a lot of people still do, which is fine, on their phone, editing with their thumbs. I can basically edit something as quickly as possible with under an hour that, might take someone several hours to do on their phone. So that's another thing that just kind of is basically the speed, the format, and the fact that everyone was just watching on their phones. I mean, YouTube, now it's like 80% of people are on their phone, but it was very unclear in 2017, like who's interacting with this and how are they interacting with this? Whereas TikTok was like, the audience is right here. They're all watching on their phones. It's very simple. It's going straight to them.
Yeah. We sort of in social editing, right? We sort of talked about the feedback loop being really fast, right? That's
Right.
the goal. And so when we, in the early days of Twitter or even Facebook and these other sort of platforms, right, the best folks on there, right, where the best producers were really able to sort of understand that feedback loop and
Right.
sort of see that wider audience, but also then sort of narrow that in to say, hey, what's the Washington Post version of this?
Yeah.
Just like you said, and the ability to say, well, we used to say, right, like a family newspaper, right? Which is like why there were so
Local.
many sort of that's right, local. That's the local piece.
Yeah.
So that and why all those rules, right? Because I don't think a lot of people don't understand, like why was it so restricted in that moment, or why did you feel so restricted? It's like, well, yeah, you could feel it every day in the newsroom, right? Saying, well, okay, where's the boundary here, and why? What is the sensitivity, right? How many conversations do we have about swearing? Right.
Yeah.
And oh my God, even in articles, it was like 14 editors needed to weigh in on swear words, including all the way up the chain, much less like a full on idea, right, in a video.
Yes.
So I think like that's the thing that I think about a lot. To pivot it a little bit forward though, I think that it's really interesting. You talk a little bit about the editing, and we do want to talk about the creative process a little bit, right? Like, when you sort of meet and talk to people now who really do most of the editing on their phone, like what is that something you recommend? Like, do you want people to start out there? Do you want people to kind of move into editing in Premiere or something on their desktop? Like, what's your sort of entryway into that for people who are looking to sort of enter this space?
So I used to be much more, I guess, closed-minded about it, where I was just like, you really should just you should just edit on your computer. And I still feel that is a better option, if you can. And there's a lot of ifs there. Like if you have spent hours editing, like learning the app, if you have access to a computer that can run Adobe Premiere or whatever that app, like, so, I don't want to, if someone is just has a phone to do it and that's what they're working on, I think that's great. The other thing is the type of video. So if it's just like, a really good example, a more recent one too, Annalise Roy, who's at the Post, she also was kind of like on our team a little bit, but does her own independent reporting independent of Washington Post Universe. And she just basically walks into the halls of Congress and the office building in Rayburn, whatever. And she just like follows congressmen around and asks them like 3 questions or whatever. And they're really great videos. And she can do that all on her phone because it's basically 1 or 2 takes, or it's 1 take that she can edit quickly. So that's the type of thing, put a text box on it, say what it's about, post it. That's great. That's super valuable to your audience. That makes a lot of sense. It's almost better to do it on your phone than try to offload on your computer, do those quick edits, and then put it back on your phone. But there's, this type of stuff that I do is like very much, I would never want to ever try to attempt it on my phone. That's like multiple cuts and characters and scenes and things like that would just take years and not years, but a long time to do, especially with my thumbs. So I really encourage people to do what they can. I really still think overall it's important to learn a video editing software, if you're any kind of video journalist, because in my mind, video, really any kind of video, just someone that just likes making video too, outside of journalism. But I think the most important piece of any video is the editing. And maybe right after that is writing. And like the least most important thing is, and I'm not saying it's not important, but just like the on camera part. Um, Obviously you should like you want to be like present on camera. You want it to look good and feel good. But that is something that I think can come together with good writing and then good editing to kind of make it flow really well. So for me, the video editing piece is so important to any video. It's what makes or breaks the video. Case in point, the early TikToks, we had a lot of reporters who were not necessarily comfortable on camera, but like there was a funny premise around them or an interesting idea. And that's what made it a good video. It didn't matter that they might feel awkward or were awkward. As long as they were earnest, it made it did just fine because the actual content and what we were talking about was good.
Yeah. Editing, number 1, 2, writing, 3, on camera piece. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping back a little bit to sort of talking about some of the rules around the Washington Post. So you went independent, and one of the first comments on the first video that I saw of yours was basically something along the lines of, Dave Jorgenson has now been unshackled by all like this. And I was like, well, that's like a really strong statement. And like all this, and I was like, wow, that is very intense. But like, is that true? Like, what do you feel like is the big difference between then and now? And you said it's like a one night turnaround. So like, how unshackled are you, Dave?
I don't think the reason unshackled doesn't work is there was never really shackles on me. I think I was really just in a smaller room, and now I'm in a bigger room. And that's really maybe because, you know, I've seen a lot of comments like that and continue to. And, you know, I finally saw someone point out that like, actually his videos aren't that different. I was like, yeah, that's the correct take. The difference is vocabulary, really. And that there's certain things, and this is why I've been making a big push about having our own style guide, which we're going to put on our site. At lni.media. And the style guide we're just going to build over time. And whenever we update it, we'll try to make a TikTok or short about like that decision. So last week we did a video about Zelensky and how we're going to spell it with 2 Y's. And there are things that might be big to some people, things that seemingly as small as that to much bigger things like we're going to call what's happening in Gaza a genocide, which is things that I couldn't do at the Post. And that's a case by case basis. But those are kind of like hot topics, and I'm not doing that because they're hot topics, but I think that's why they stick out more. But the rest of the stuff and the way I talk about things, I really am still trying to take a very, for lack of a better term, I don't want to say moderate politically, but just like I'm trying to stay as middle of the road in terms of giving you as many facts as possible as I can. And what's really interesting is that, or to me is interesting, I was doing all these videos based off of Post reporting. Now I can do it based off of reporting everywhere. So I'm really trying to do a good job, but like a thorough job of any video is sourced from several different publications. The one on Monday was sourced from a really good foxnews.com report. And I think no one seemed to know, like no one pointed that out in the comments. You know what I mean? They were just like, this is a good video. So I don't have any interest in being like, look at me unshackled. I think that's, if they want to have that narrative, they can have it. But to me, it's just, I just have like a little bit more room to run around, and I'm going to take that when I can. But I that's not really the point. In fact, the only thing I don't want to say I miss, because that's not true. The only thing that might be missing from the content now is there's no longer that like friction of, he got away with saying that, like that doesn't matter. That is no longer there. And that was a small piece of it, but I think early on that was an interesting idea, is like, is this guy going to get fired for making all these TikToks? That is no longer there.
Well, it's really compelling, right? As a social concept, right?
Yeah.
That's behind the whole like intern trope too, right?
Right.
With social, like, you're so far away from that, but it's like, even in that sort of kind of space, right? Just walking around Times Square last week, and it's like, there's like a big ad that's like, I'm just a 21-year-old kid, and I'm just selling this AI software. And you're playing into this idea, right? That that you're getting away with something. And
right.
like,
I literally had a TikTok that was that, like a lot of them early on, but like that was the exact joke, was like, am I going to get fired? And I knew I wasn't, but like I would put that out there and people would be like, I mean, I didn't know I wasn't, but I felt pretty good.
Well, thanks to Lauren and Micah.
Yes, exactly.
Along those lines, you sort of are beginning to sort of cheat into this a little bit too, but this idea that you're really one of the sort of leaders in thinking about what is the next generation of media literacy. There's a lot of just like
Mhm.
big efforts out there. Everyone cares. So there's the media trust problem is like a huge thing that people like to amp up in a huge way. How do you think about media literacy now? Has that changed over time? I know you've been really consistent about
Yeah.
talking about it, even in the early TikTok days, all the way through. You
Mhm.
seem to really come back to that as a theme, even
Yeah.
though it may not be sort of out in front of like, hey, I need to talk about this at like, in a really explicit ways.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you saying that because I feel this. I think that's that might be the through line, other than humor. There's these fires in Australia, like brush fires, where it got really dry, and it was crazy. It was everywhere, and there was this narrative even on TikTok, and this is like early 2020 or late 2019, before the pandemic, but right before, and it was that no one was covering this, including and like people were tagging the Washington Post, and I was like, it's literally in the paper, like it's in our physical paper, it's online, and I did a video that was like a little tongue in cheek of like holding the paper up, and that was the kind of the start of me going and like learning. There's two things: me going, I think media literacy is going to be even more important as we go on, and also I learned my lesson from there of like, okay, but don't be too much of a dick about it. Like there's a way in where you have to recognize that people might be coming at this because they really care about any given story, and you just have to recognize that. And so I continue to use humor as a way in where like often I play myself as the butt of the joke getting something wrong. And we had this whole thing, Misinformation Monday, that was around that. But anyway, the long-term goal became like, I just want to sort of bring awareness to these things and start giving out, even just tools of how to look for stuff. And as recently as yesterday, um, I've been really focused on the AI part of media literacy. And we had a video about, did you see the Will Smith crowd thing that he posted on his? Okay.
No.
So Will Smith has been on this huge tour in Europe, and it really is huge. Like I think some people even then are like, is it that big? Like, well, Europe loves Will Smith. And he posts these videos, and they're like these sort of montagey videos, and it plays like maybe 45 seconds of one of his new songs, and in one of these videos it cuts to the crowd, and the crowd is like very clearly AI generated. And it's just like, it's bad, right? And so obviously, like as soon as you see this, all the comments are just like, holy cow, this was terrible. Like, Will, what are you doing? And one of the people even in the signs is it's a person holding a sign, and it says, you helped me survive cancer. Thank you, Will. Right. So obviously people are outraged, right? Your reaction right now is exactly what you would expect. Like, that's what? But it turns out that the person who put this video, because I doubt Will Smith edited this video himself, right? So whoever on his team put this together actually took real photos from his concert that they'd actually posted on Instagram weeks before, and then they had AI generated them to turn them into 5-second clips to put into this montage. So the people actually are real. The signs were real. All this stuff came from a real source, but it was AI generated to look like a video. And so that was where I was like, oh, this is such an interesting like lesson. And and by the way, shout out to Andy Bao. I don't want to butcher his last name, but he's at waxy.org. He's the one who wrote a very thorough piece on this, and I was able to grab a lot from that on this. But the like this is a really interesting way into like AI. Not only is like we're just learning like what's real, like our bunnies jumping on trampolines, but also there's different versions of this where like, yeah, you can and maybe should be outraged about AI being AI generations in a video, whatever. But there's an interesting thing here where he wasn't flat out lying. And so I don't know. I just think there's a lot of like, that's another piece of media literacy is like understanding where all this comes from and recognizing how to look for it. And now there's a new thing where you should go, okay, this video looks AI generated, but did it come from a real photo? And that might be important in the future for any given news story.
And do you think there's like a cumulative effect of that? Because like, well, the criticism, right, is like, okay, you debunked the Will Smith video, great, you got one drop in the bucket. But like, what is the sort of long-term outlook on something? Like if you zoom way out, where does this lead us? Because everyone, again, like the premise of this whole thing, of this whole question is like, people seem to be very alarmed in the
Mm-hmm.
journalism industry and a little bit
Yes.
like, oh my gosh, like this is going to be the end and downfall of the entirety of factual information. And I tend to be someone that's like not quite as worried about this, but I don't want to be a person that's like, no, like you're all wrong. But help unpack a little bit like what it means to sort of teach something over time, right?
Right.
And what it is to sort of teach an audience, individuals, others, like the sort of, again, is it a cumulative effect, or is it a different kind of way that you think of it in your mind?
I Cumulative effect is not wrong, and the reason I would probably lean more towards that is because, part of like that video I did yesterday, and part of any time I talk about media literacy, it's not just people who followed for the last 6 weeks. A lot of the people following me now followed me for the last 6 years. They just found me on another account, and the reason I bring that up is because I built up trust with them over time. So the cumulative is like, yeah, there's. I'm telling you about this specific AI thing, but I'm also like, it's another piece of like, here's, and I don't explicitly say in the video, of course, but I'm saying, here's why you should trust me. Here's another reason to follow me, or to go to me if you're confused about anything. And like the prime example that I always like to go back to is when the war in Ukraine broke out, on TikTok in particular, there was clips everywhere that were like, this is what's happening in Ukraine. And it was just people using clips from any given situation, right? And including Call of Duty, and saying this is, yeah, no, that was a real thing. And that the one, I remember one in particular that was actually very convincing, and it was from like a cut scene in Call of Duty. And so we asked people, can you, like, if you see this, tag us at the Washington Post, and we'll, like, if we can, we'll get it back to our forensics people and let you know, like, we'll do videos. So we basically became a voice of reason in all this, of like, this is real, this is not real. And so that's where it's important, is like, this, maybe this one thing with Will Smith, which it really isn't important, won't matter, or won't reach that many people. But over time, you might kind of go, oh, this guy did this video about AI. I could probably tag him in this, and or see if he's already did a video about this other thing that happened. And that might, slowly help kind of get people to a point of, at very least, questioning what's in front of them. And to your point, like with AI, like it could go any number of directions. And so I'm really also trying to cover it in that way, or I'm just like taking that as in a case by case basis too, versus an overarching AI is bad. The closest I've gotten to that is like right now at L&I, we're not using AI for anything, but not because we think AI is all bad. It's just because right now it's kind of unclear what tools, what all the tools are doing, and what like what's the effect of them, or like what's being uploaded to any given server, that kind of thing. But that doesn't mean that it's like it's more of just a, let's kind of take this carefully. Not unlike our parents when the internet happened, we're all a little bit more careful. I think that's how AI should be approached now. But it doesn't mean that you have to be terrified of it. It just means that maybe, like, don't go into AOL.com without a parent or something. I don't know.
I definitely was on AOL
Yeah.
without a parent. So maybe that just is a lesson for all of us,
Right.
the young people out there. It's just
Right.
unsupervised. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I think this, just to wrap up our trust conversation just briefly here, like, I think one of the most interesting things here is I had Joy Mayer from Trusting News on to talk with me at Harvard about sort of where sort of creators and journalists meet, and what does that mean? How do you define that space? And she said something really interesting, which is like that we're all worried about the trust problem out there in the media, and she looks at it as consumers having a trust budget. So that there's the idea that you have to spend your budget somewhere, your money, you have it in a wallet, right? And we're all worried about getting this trust back as if it has disappeared. But the money is still there, right? The trust dollars are still there, and that they're being spent elsewhere outside of journalism. And so I guess the question for you to sort of wrap up this piece is just to sort of say, like, do you think that's true? Do you think that creators in particular are sort of are taking trust away in that sort of zero sum piece? And if so, like, where do you put yourself, right? Maybe this is also a little bit of a hybrid to sort of say, like, what do you call yourself in this new world? Is this, are you, hey, I'm taking away trust from the Washington Post? I kind of don't think so. But at the same time, are you building something where you are looking to be a trusted voice as a creator, or whatever you describe yourself as?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually very interested in being a bridge between the two, not just for my own personal ambitions, but because I do think legacy media and so much of media is generally speaking very well-meaning and very earnest in how they approach a lot of things. And I think it's good that there's pushback from a lot of independent creators on any given topic. I think that's a really natural thing, like in terms of how something might be covered. And that's why people trust independent journalists more versus an organization. For me, my goal is to go, hey, and this kind of goes back to the piece of I source all kinds of articles from everywhere for any video. I'm putting that in the captions of every video, which is like, hey, this was sourced from reporting by the Times. This was from The Guardian. This was from FoxNews.com. That's very much by design, one, to give credit, of course, but also to like show, hey, this is a collaborative effort. And it took a lot of people to get you this piece of news. I think that metaphor does make sense too, though I don't know if there's a finite amount of trust bucks or whatever you want to call it, or Shroot bucks, or, Stanley Nichols. I think it's more just that people are a little bit, I think they've just been wronged so many times by so many places. And it's easy to associate that with a legacy news org, for instance, but it's also easier than you think to kind of earn their trust back. It's not impossible. It's more just about, again, that cumulative effort of just continuing over time to kind of get them back there. And I found that with the Post all the time. I mean, again, we talked about that narrative of me leaving, like being unshackled, but up until the last day I was there, my trust with the audience was still there. So I think the difference is not so much that people don't trust these organizations. It's just that they trust people more. And if those people, wherever they are, is what's more important than, like what company they're coming from.
So I think it's a good segue into what ownership means, right? Like, what does it mean to sort of own your own IP? And your own, you talked about trust of people over institutions or brands specifically. And like, what does that mean to you? I mean, you can talk about sort of like, what does that mean sort of from the contract law sort of sense? But I also am just sort of looking for like, what is the feeling, right? What is the feeling of owning something versus sort of like, hey, I'm sort of bringing myself and my efforts and my abilities and my IP to another organization.
Okay, this might sound a little hippy dippy. I don't know what the right phrase is, but I view a lot of internet video, anything you put on the internet is also like art. As soon as you make it and put it out there, it's no longer yours. And I still feel that way. The main thing about ownership is just, like, I built something I'm really proud of, and over time I want to continue to, like, frankly, profit off of it in some way, because I want to just like be able to live day to day as a journalist, which can be increasingly difficult. So there's that piece of it. But in terms of like, whenever I make a TikTok, I sort of wash my hands of it in a way of like, for better or worse. Like, if it does well, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. And I learn from it. But that's how I think about stuff day to day. But long term, it's just like, I really want to build something I'm excited about, and that, like, whenever I retire, if I ever retire, I can go like, that L&I thing was like, that's really, from the start, I was able to make something exactly as I wanted.
Just want to say thank you, Dave. Really appreciate you sharing all these insights and expertise with us. It was a really fun conversation.
Thanks, Ryan. Great questions. Loved it. Nothing here to satirize. Very good podcast, but
I knew it.
Yes.
I did it just purposely for that reason.
Yes.